who is Dr. Pete Penny. He was formerly a consultant in charge of the neuropsychiatric and epilepsy units at the Maudsley Hospital in Denmark and London, and he is co-director of research at the Department of Neurophysiology, Broadmoor Hospital, and consultant neuropsychiatrist at the London Sleep Centre, running a clinical and forensic practice. He did, back in 1969, he did a study in meditation, which was subsequently published in 1977. Last 9 years, he's been studying magnetic field tomography at the Riken Neuroscience Institute in Japan, and in the UK, he is researching near-death experiences in coronary care units and surveying approaching death experiences in hospices and nursing homes in southern England. He'll talk about end-of-life experiences. So please welcome Dr. Pete Penny.
Wow. I hadn't expected to see so many of you. In fact, I set up my wife and asked if she could get one or two people here to stay behind while you're all waiting. So let me thank you all for coming and being here. But what a wonderful conference. Absolutely amazing. Now, can you hear this?
Yes.
At the back. Okay, two things. Hearing, yes. Understand. You understand it?
Yes.
Okay, then we're winning. I have two things which I'd like to do. The first one is to dedicate this talk to Marlene Nogre. So may I ask you all just to fall silent, fill your hearts with love, and send them to Marlene. Thank you. I met Marlene, first of all, in 2003 at a Spiritist conference in Sao Paulo, and I've met her on several other occasions since then. I've always been fascinated by her energy, her creativity, and the way that she has brought the Spiritist movement to England in the way that she has. And so my thanks go to Elsa Rossi as well. And thank you so much for asking me here. So, with that as the introduction, I have a question for you all. It's going to be a two-part question. How many of you believe there is an afterlife? I've got nobody to convert. Okay. Then how many of you, and listen carefully, how many of you have an experience that there is an afterlife? Okay, so some of you may be short on experience. All right, well, then let me...
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about end-of-life experiences. End-of-life experiences are the mental states of the dying. Now there's tons and tons on how we care for the dying in terms of their physical state. It was practically nothing when I went to the literature about the mental states of the dying. Some very old papers, but nothing much else. So why haven't we studied what happens when we die? Surely that's terribly important. No, it's not. It's not important at all. Why? Because we are so afraid of it. So why are we so afraid of dying? Is it because we feel that we'll be extinguished? Well, you guys all think you won't be. Shakespeare, I but to die and go we know not where, to lie in cold obstruction, to rot, this sensible warm motion to become a kneaded clod, and the delighted spirit to bathe in fiery floods or to reside in thrilling regions of thick-ribbed ice. Not a happy picture. Try this one. This is a poem by Silence Quirk. It's a modern one. Dying is part of our life, the same thing as living. There is no need to fear death. The only fear needed to be is of not existing, not sharing love and honour, not feeling any close person near you, being thoughtless without feelings, not experiencing things. That is the most scary thing. So essentially, we're frightened of dying, and for various reasons. Now I'm going to start, not straight away with the mental states of the dying, but to look at just one advancing consciousness, which I think is important. Because, you know, since the Renaissance, science has denied non-locality. Non-locality means, as you heard from Dr. Saab, that things happen at a distance. But it means much more than that. It means we can only be brains in a non-magical universe. Well, first of all, I think the universe is absolutely magical. I certainly think we're more than brains. So that is what mechanistic science says. And as Stephen Hawking says about life after death, it's only a bedtime story. But this is what it leads to, death in the 21st century. Do you all really want to end up like that? Any of you like to do that? No, I can't see you all putting your hands up. Well, then make sure that you don't, and write the appropriate documents so people know that you want to either go to a hospice or die at home, rather than end up in a hospital with that happening to you. So let's ask the question, why are we afraid? Because we don't know who we are. And unless you're absolutely certain that you know who you are, you can't answer these questions. Are we transcendent or just bundles of neurons? We really do need to be quite clear on that. Now, the advances in consciousness research that I want to draw to your attention is recognition that there are two modes of knowing. The first is subject-object. This is ordinary consciousness. In other words, you're a subject, you look out, and you see an object. That's subject-object consciousness. And it's ego-centered. So that means then that you don't, in fact, necessarily leave room for transcendence, because it's ego-centered. Me, you. Non-egoic consciousness leads to experiences of the transcendence in daily life, the end of suffering, and profound happiness. And this is called awakening. Now, all of you will have thoughts of exactly what awakening is, and most of you will know that it's something which is much prized by yogis and people in monasteries and esoteric people. But there's now a course being taught on how to awaken. And this is because Geoffrey Martin has studied 1,500 awake people. So he knows exactly what it is. So awakening was always thought to be the end of suffering, very special religious people. But the latest research shows that this is not so. These people are the people who we thought were likely to awaken, but in fact, it's like this. So when I come back here, if I'm invited back again, I hope I'll be talking to an awake audience, because it's something that can occur and you can, in fact, change. So if we are transcendent, And that you find when you awaken. You are transcendent. It means you were never born and we never die. So it's very straightforward. And there are now programs that can teach people how to awaken. So transcendence is now a fundamental part of human experience. So let us think about dying from this point of view. But remember, and this is very important, no belief systems. Leave your belief systems behind and only look at the evidence. Only look at what the dying tell you. And let's see what sort of picture we have. But remember, keep transcendence in view. Few of us are prepared to look closely at death. Why is that? I think it's something. I'm going to show you a video. I want to know. Well, I put that on so that it would link up with what Andrew was telling us right at the beginning of this conference. It depends on the narratives we have. And this talk is really a lot about the narratives which we have and how we need to change them. Because you could see that those people weren't happy with that narrative, that there's such a thing as a Grim Reaper and that he might come and reap you now. So we need to think about what we're telling people, because few of us are prepared to look closely at death. And the reason that we don't look closely at death is called Freud's paradox. When discussing death, we're happy to talk about other people's deaths, but never our own. At the cocktail party, you will, of course, talk about, have you heard that so-and-so has just died? You know what that is.
Just died.
Thank you. So, how do we deal with death in the 21st century? Sweeping death under the carpet. And we do this, we ignore it in our society. Was it always like this? No, it wasn't. And that is because the people in Victorian times lived with death all the time. Most people had 2 or 3 siblings who were dying. And death was very common and people died young. They don't now. And with this an enormous emphasis, driven in part by science, on the body, we can see that the body is important and not what happens at death. So contemporary Western attitudes towards death, medicalized and banished from the home. Death is not natural, instead it's a medical failure. It is offensive and should occur in private. Daily life should be unmarked by death, and we make sure in our society that it is. And death is an embarrassment. Often the dying and bereaved are isolated. I know that none of you will have done this, but it's not unusual for people to who've been bereaved and their child has died for their close friends to cross over the pavement because they can't face facing the bereaved. So if we're unhappy in our society because we have no rituals left about dying. So the current situation, 32% of Britons fear dying alone. 56% of us will die in NHS hospitals, very high. NHS spending on the dying is minimal. It's got a little bit better recently. In NHS hospitals, more than 50% of complaints, this is of all complaints, refer to care of the dying. And why should that be? Because hospitals are not for dying, they're for getting better. And so, of course, it's going to be poorly done. We know that death is the shutting down of the body and brain, but we know little about the dying process and the mental states of the dying. Does the transcendence shine through as death progresses? Now that is a very important issue. It's enormously important because we have to understand what the dying process is, and is there a transcendent component to it? Do you know what is going to happen as you die? Do you? Everyone going on a journey needs a map to tell them what to expect. Why, in our society, do we have no clear map? But we don't. There you are. Many of you come from the Amazon. Do you really want to go into that area without a map? So why do you want to die without a clear map of the process of dying? Is death the end of consciousness or the beginning of a journey? Let's have a look at that and just see what the evidence is. Why not ask people to know what it is like? We ask people who are dying to tell us what is actually happening to them. We may find we need to take a quite different view of the process, and it will lead us to a better understanding of consciousness. In other words, what we need to do is think about the mental states of the dying. One of the first things we must do is to listen to their language and understand what they mean. And here we come back to narratives again. And journeying language is used by many of them. I joined my daughter after an hour at the hospital, and we both sat chatting to my mother. She spoke to me about my life and my future, all interspersed with reference to these people who are now at the end of her bed. She told us that she wouldn't be there the next day, as these people would pick her up when she fell and take her on a journey. We were slightly spooked at her comments, but she was totally at ease. She insisted we shouldn't cry when she died. And they returned after Christmas Eve when she had died. Now, she was quite clear she was going on a journey. She said that. What we need to do is to try to change our language about the dying. Instead of talking about them being rubbed out, grim reapers and so on, we need to change it. So we could think of dying not just as the end of one journey, but the start of another, following what the dying say. No belief in this, just what the dying say. So we can design a map. Dissolution of consciousness with a grim reaper and death process. We've got to change that. So what about having a different image there? Say something like that. Would that be better? Certainly be happier. If I was going to consciousness and I saw that, I'd be really happy. See the grim reaper? No. So I think these are much better. And I think we ought to change our language about the stages of dying. So, welcome and preparation are two phases, followed by transition, which is a word they use actually, of death itself. And then there is advanced notice, which is premonitions. Premonitions are scary. Deathbed visions are scary. Transiting to new realities is all scary, but welcome, preparation and transition is much better. As there was very little on this, we set out to find some answers. And so we first asked carers of the dying. And we did a 5-year retrospective and a 1-year prospective study, England, Holland and Ireland, 110 carers. We have over 1,500 accounts from the general public, interviewed doctors, nurses, auxiliary staff, chaplains, volunteers, and this was all funded by the BL Foundation. It was great. And I heard at this conference, this very end conference, that Dr. Lucette has in fact validated what we found. It's so exciting. He, in a well-designed study, has got figures which are almost the same as ours. So it doesn't matter if you die in Ireland, if you die in Hampshire, if you die in Rotterdam, or you die in Brazil, you're going to come across exactly the same stages. That is very important. These were my colleagues, Sue Brain, Hilary Lovelace, Nika Kodam, and Dr. Una McColville. So let's start with the first step, advance notice. I don't like premonitions. I'm scared. Advance notice is good. A premonition of your own or someone else's death. Well, there's lots of history in folklore. Valkyries in Northern Europe, you went out to fight battle, you saw the Valkyries, and you knew that you were for the chop. Ravens circling over a cottage in Devon was a sure sign the person in the cottage was going to die. And in Yorkshire, the yapping of the Gabriel hounds were a good indicator the person in that cottage was going to die. So there's lots in our folklore, but you get these advance notices now, and here's one. In fact, it was an advance notice of somebody else's death. I woke up in the morning totally upset over my daughter's death. I was so surprised and confused to see her lying next to me that I nudged her to see if she was alive. She'd apparently gotten up during the night and climbed in next to me. When she moved, I cried uncontrollably with relief that she was not dead. She did not make any fuss. Perhaps she knew why I felt relief. I did not tell her that I thought that she was dead. I could not remember any dream, but the feelings were so strong and real, exactly as they were 2 days later when she was the victim of a hit-and-run accident. So clear advance notice. So we can start our map with advance notice, as you can see on the left. Now we actually go into the process of death as we go on. So the most common end-of-life experiences are deathbed visions, a scary term, of which there are many accounts. The first scientific study of deathbed visions was carried out by Sir William Barrett and published in 1926. And you can actually buy this book now. It's very good studies. He did a lot of work. And it's published, and there he is, lovely Victoria. And so we can ask the question, do end-of-life experiences occur? Now, when we started this in 2002, it was not clear. There was a clear divide in the hospice, in hospices. The doctors said no. You won't find any here. And the nurses said, calling me aside into a room, yeah, we have lots of those. So it was very difficult for the nurses to talk about these things. In fact, in a hospice in Scotland, I was invited to give a talk, and the doctor said, you're wasting your time, but you can come in and talk to us if you want. So I said, I wasn't wasting my time, I just wanted to tell people what happened. And the same thing occurred. Again and again, people put up their hands and said, yes, that's what we've seen, that's what we know. And I'm pleased to say that if I were the hospices that we were working in, the culture changed. Or I thought it had, until one of them, Mark Hugh, he was a new director. And when I had finished saying what we found in his hospital, he said, I didn't think these things ever occur. So the present consensus is about 80% of those dying consciously will have an end-of-life experience that may be higher. So what on earth is a deathbed vision. So a deathbed vision is a vision that comforts. And so we've called this step welcome, because in fact most of the visitors are dead relatives who come, and they come to welcome you. That's what they say. When I was working as a district nurse, I used to visit an 80-year-old lady once a week. She eventually became weaker and was semi-conscious. The day after she died, the daughter said that she was lying peacefully and suddenly sat bolt upright with a beaming smile on her face and said, "Joe, how nice of you to come and see me." Joe was her deceased husband. She lay down again and died soon after. The daughter was very sensible and practical and really believed that her father had visited. Well, that's a welcome, really, isn't it? How nice of you to come. We were sitting with him, talking quietly. He was too ill to contribute much, but liked to hear us chatting. Suddenly he leaned forward and stared across the room, became very happy and animated, and began to talk to people he could obviously see, but we couldn't. He called them each by name, asking how they were and how wonderful it was to see them again. It became apparent that they were the men who had served with him at the Somme and died there. There was a look of wonderment on his face, and he forgot his pain. So again, more visitors coming to welcome. And here's an unexpected one, which is important actually, and this was what triggered Barrett's interest in deathbed visions. A couple of days before my father's death, my grandmother died suddenly, but we did not tell my father as we did not want to upset him. As he was passing away, he turned to my mother and said, "Your mum is here. What on earth is she doing here?" He then smiled and died. I think the fact that my father could not possibly have known that his mother-in-law was dead makes this experience all the more interesting, and to my mind, convincing of an afterlife. It's very persuasive. So we took 118 visions and we asked the questions, who did the dying see? The answer to that is 24% see parents, persons unknown, 17%. How they usually described as spiritual beings. Greeting, joyful response, but no speech. These are people who are more ill, because remember, these occur mainly in the last fortnight of life. 14%, other relatives 14%, and so it goes on down. Angels in our culture, very few. If you want to see an angel, you're unlikely to. What about your friends? No. Maybe one will turn up, but not many. And what about your pets? Your favourite cat or your favourite dog? We have one or two accounts of that only. So you probably won't be met by your pet. Sorry about that. I thought it was going to be my mother. And of course he was right, it should be. So the next question is, who sees them? Well, the dying. Very rarely others in the room, especially children, and very, very rarely hospice or hospital staff. So they are seen by others, and as soon as they're seen by others, they're no longer an hallucination. They are, of course, an apparition. How do they come? Often come into the room shortly before death, will stand around or sit on the deathbed in the room, appear to be in real space as the dying direct their gaze and comment at a particular place, maybe more than one person. Occasionally unknown people will wait at a distance and come closer as death approaches. So that's interesting. We've got a lot of accounts of these people being seen outside the hospice to begin with, and then coming into the room. Why do they come? To greet the dying person. So it's perfectly possible to call these welcome visits. To reassure them they will be with them on their journey, to tell them when it is time to go. They can be negotiated with and the time of death delayed for a short while. Did you know that? Did you know if you didn't want to die just then, you don't have to talk to them? Now, the interesting thing is they will in fact listen to you for important things like maybe your son or daughter coming from another country. But the hospice party was not busy feeling like it. They weren't. And here's a delaying tactics one. My sister heard Dad talking very crossly to someone in his room. Fearing that one of her children had gone in and upset him, she went in to see what was going on. Only Dad was there in his bed. My sister asked him who he was talking to, and he replied, "I was telling the angels that I was not ready to go yet. He knew I was coming and was determined to stay alive until I'd seen him." So that's useful negotiation, but not very long to go. So choosing when to go. Sorry guys, that won't work. Now, as I said at the beginning, when we started this, there were very few papers, and after we published our papers, I'm pleased to say that there was more interest in the palliative care community, and some interesting papers are now being published. This is one by Christopher in Palliative Medicine in 2014, so it's only last year. And he in fact talked to the dying, and he tried to estimate the comfort that they brought. And you can see in this graph as the comfort rises towards death, which is at the end of the slide. And so these visions are enormously comforting. I was in Canada and talking to a palliative care conference there, and one of the nurses came up, and she was particularly struck by this, because she said she used it all the time. And I said, what did she do? And she said that if a patient was lonely on their own, with nobody visiting, she would tell them about the welcome. And she would say, who do you know? Who's your favourite relative or person? They would choose somebody who was a favourite, let's say Mary. And then she would say, well, as time goes on, you'll probably see Mary. Well, it's a bit of suggestion there, good. And as time went on, she got weaker and weaker. And so the nurse who was with her fairly often said, how are you? She said, alone. And then she said, have you seen Mary? She said, no. The next day the nurse went in again and said, how are you? She was smiling. She said, have you seen Mary? She said, yeah. And so the nurse said, it's okay then, let go. She let go and died that evening. So it's really practical. It's something that the caring staff ought to know about. But is there a difference between cultures? Yes, huge. This is, the top one is an American study. This comes from Osis and Haraldson in 1977. This is one of the largest ones. And religious figures, you can see at the top, the left, the white. And the apparitions of the dead are 70%. The light blue is, in fact, people who are alive. Religious figures in India, where you expect to see religious figures, they're 50%, and apparitions of the dead have shrunk to 29%. So think that there will be a cultural component. I was in touch with John Lerner, who was working around a hospice in Houston, in the Bible Belt. And they were seeing angels left, right, and centre, but we don't. And they don't in Brazil either. Interesting. So we can put that in: negotiation, comfort, and welcome. It's all beginning to make more sense. So let's go on to the third step, which is preparation. Moving to new realities and other paradise-like realms. And it was this really which got me interested in the subject. That was because I was familiar with the experiences of those who undergo a near-death experience. But these, of course, are quite different. Or are they? Suddenly she stared intently up at the window. This lasted only minutes, but it seemed ages. She suddenly turned to me and said, please, Pauline, don't ever be afraid of dying. I see the beautiful light and I was going towards it. I wanted to go into that light. It was so peaceful. I really had to fight to come back. Sadly, she died the next morning, but I knew she had seen something that day which gave her comfort and peace when she knew she only had hours to live. So there again is the light. comforting and loving. And this is an Italian one. I think it's a nice one. It's a mother-in-law who helps her son, mother-in-law is dead, who helps her son-in-law prepare. The gauze over his face moved. I ran to him. Adriana, my dear, your mother, who had died 3 years before, is helping me to break out of this disgusting body. There is so much light here, so much peace. And so again, we have the concept of transcendence with light and peace. And then somebody who is fully prepared. My father was at his, my grandfather's bedside, deeply distressed. But my grandfather quietly said to my father, "Don't worry, Leslie, I'm all right. I can see and hear the most beautiful things, and you must not worry." He quietly died, lucid to the end. I can see and hear the most beautiful things. So just before he died, he had the hallmarks of transcendence. I was nursing my friend who had definite views that there was no afterlife. Isn't this fascinating? Not that there was no afterlife, but that it actually makes no difference what your belief structure is. In her last couple of hours, she became very peaceful and arose from her unconsciousness, periodically saying clearly, happily, such phrases as, "I will know soon. Come on, get on with it then. I'm ready to go, and it's so beautiful." She had immediately lapsed back into unconsciousness after uttering these phrases. She was very obviously content, happy, and at peace. It was a wonderful experience for her partner and me. So again, you don't have to believe to get it. So what is this new reality that they all transit into? In fact, it's an alternating into it and back again, into it and back again. It's a preparation. Dead relatives are present to help. There's a waiting area with helping spiritual beings, very like the near-death experience world. Love, light, and compassion, wholeness, and feelings of unity. Now, there's just been another paper published by Renz in Switzerland, and they argue that dying is a transition. And this is from their paper. Results. Our data, 80 patients and the follow-up 600, it's a large study, suggests that patients undergo transition into another state of consciousness, beyond anxiety, ego, and pain. Very important. You need to be taught this in your math. Transition appears to have 3 stages: anxiety, struggle, denial, and then acceptance. Family processes and maturation, finding meaning and dignity and coping with trauma. It may depend on the transitional process and also hinder or facilitate this transitional process. Conclusions. Understanding dying as transition may induce a radical reinterpretation of what patients need. So this is a totally independent study. We've come to the same conclusion, dependent on the data, and it's a large study. Let's leave preparation. I just want to mention terminal lucidity very quickly because it does occur. And this is the sudden arousal from coma just before death. My father had been unconscious for a day. You might actually ask yourself this question. If he's been in coma and he suddenly comes to, what is his experience? What will it have been? Well, you might say he doesn't experience anything. My father had been unconscious for a day or so. His right arm and leg had not moved for a month or so. He's had a stroke, he was had a stroke, but he sat up in bed effortlessly, with an incredulous expression, eyes and mouth open as in disbelief. I assumed he could see someone at the foot of the bed. After a few seconds, he gently sank back onto the pillow and he had died. Now, some people, when they come to at that stage, report the transcendent reality. Those of you who are interested, there's a very good patient by Armand Grayson on cases of terminal lucidity, and what you find, and this is a real puzzle for science, is that you can have schizophrenia, affective disorders, neurological dysfunction, you can have profound Alzheimer's, and when you wake up in this lucid interval, you are fully in touch, and that is an amazing thing. So what is happening? clearly have not gone. There's another one, hit by Sandy the Cloudbirds, lighting up before death. That's what the Victorians called it. So, we're now doing well. We have advance notice, welcome, preparation. And so I've changed the picture to what they say in the ultimate reality. Light and the idea of movements towards elsewhere. Well, what does all this mean? It's just the brain, isn't it? Confusional states. They're not confused. Intensive care psychosis, these are paranoid, they're not like that. Sensory deprivation is very different from the structured relating visions that you have. Organic psychosis, no, but they're confusional as well. Hypnagogic, that means on the borders of sleep, no, they're different. Drug psychoses, no. Temporal lobe epilepsy, absolutely not. Dreams, yes, no, and yes. There are some dream components, and some of them I would agree, but they don't have the physiology of dreams. Are they like the NDE? And the answer to that is yes. So let's leave the preparation for dying at this point, and now let's go into the transition of death. Remember what you're doing. You're stripping consciousness out of this body. And therefore, you can expect different things to happen. And they're going to be non-local. Well, the first one, non-local thing that happens is deathbed coincidences. I call these high and goodbye, because it's your last chance to say goodbye to somebody who you really know and love. It's a visit initiated by the dying person at the moment of death to someone of great emotional significance to him or her. And distance is no barrier, so it is in fact non-local. We've done a study on this which we've published, and this showed that 95%, 96% was at the time of death. The others were around the time of death. So it's very precise, this. And this is how it works. Here you are, you're in Canada today, and it's your son, he's in the UK. And at the moment of your death in Canada, there is a connection established between the two of you. Now, it is vitally important that when this visitor comes to you, you receive the visit. I would prefer to be asleep. But if you're awake, you get one sort of visit, and this is where the person will feel an intense feeling. They may feel something, but that's not necessarily so. They may get a message, but that's rare. But they know that the person has come to them. One morning around 1950, my father and I had to visit a distant relative, Kate, to tell her that her brother had died the previous day. She lived in a remote part of Easter Ross, that's in Scotland, and Easter Ross is remote, no telephones, nothing. It was not on the telephone. When Dad and I arrived at the farmhouse, we were met by Kate, who said, "I know why you have come." I heard him calling me, saying, "Kate, Kate," as he passed over. She was quite matter-of-fact about it and gave us the time of death, which was exactly the same as that recorded by the hospital. I found it an amazing experience. I've never forgotten it, nor will I ever. I was about 17 at the time. These are enormously powerful experiences for the people that get them. You don't forget them. So that's if you're awake, but what if you're asleep? And I use this one because it's, we've got lots of these, but this one is particularly clear. It's from a mother who's in Australia and a son who's in the UK. So the son, in fact, is dying. I drifted back to sleep and had the most vivid dream when my 22-year-old son was talking to me. He was telling me that he was dead, first part of the message, but that I was not to worry, second part of the message, or be upset because, the third part, he was all right. Dead, don't worry, I'm okay. Those are the messages. When I awoke, I was very disturbed and tried to contact my son. I found out later that day that he'd been drowned the previous night. I'm convinced he did contact me, and I've drawn great comfort from his visit to me over the years. Clearly non-local communication at the time of death, and they're common. They're common in Brazil, I used to say. They're certainly common in Europe. So they're certainly there. They're very interesting, so you ought to know this. So if it's in your map, the time you die, for somebody who you really have to go and see, that's your last opportunity. So features of communication, this is from 45 deathbed coincidences. 80% first-degree relative of the dying person, granddaughters and grandmothers, the largest group, and 93% were verified as occurring at the time of death. So these are things which occur at the time of death. But look at this, because this is all expectation, isn't it? Of course it is. They were expecting them to die. No wonder they got the message. It's not true, because death was expected in 44% of the cases. It was unexpected in 44% of the cases and expected in only 37%. So the majority, it wasn't an expectation they were wanting. So it's something which occurred as far as they were concerned out of the blue. Interesting. So that is kind of fine. The effect of coincidences. And they're as comforting for the relatives as deathbed visions or the welcome of the dying. Also at death, you get souvenirs. Now, what do you buy souvenirs? And these are little things which happen, which you will remember afterwards. We're not talking about the dead now. We're talking about the relatives who are there at the time of death. Very important. Clocks stop. Animals respond. They howl or meow. Machines malfunction. Light surrounds the body, shapes the scene, leaving the body. Does that happen in Brazil? Exactly the same as it does in Europe. So we can add deathbed coincidences with our high and goodbye and our souvenirs. Here's a little bit about souvenirs. This is described by people who are surrounding the body, and there are a lot of descriptions of what happens in the room. One of which is they see people exiting from the body. As my father, died, something which is very hard to describe, because it was so unexpected and because I had seen nothing like it, left up through his body and out of his head, resembled distinct, delicate, wavy lines of smoke. Smoke is not the right word, but I've not got a comparison, and then disappeared. I was the only one to see it. It left me with such a sense of peace and comfort. Two things there. Smoke is one of the stages of dying that is described in the second book of the Dead. But her point there is enormously important to us. I was the only one to see it, which left me think that it's either within the relationship of that member of the family to the person who's dying, or it's something, I think it's probably something special in their relationship, but I don't know. I mean, this is all for research. This I'm fascinated by, absolutely. It was one of the things that I was interested in, but it also occurs in Brazil. Same amount of figures as in Europe. This is light of death seen by onlookers, parallels in some respects what the dying say they see in their new reality. It depends. Sometimes it's radiant light, sometimes it's transfiguration, and sometimes it's like this. Here's a hospice chaplain. Sometimes I've seen a light which is in a corner, like candlelight. It's a golden light. It's not electric light, it's not one of the hospice lights. It just appears sometimes. It goes when they die. They take their last breath, and as everything settles down, the light goes out. What does it mean? Here's another one. When her mother was dying, this amazing light appeared in the room. The whole room was filled with this amazing light. And her mother died. So again, this wonderful light which occurs in the room at the moment of death, and it has the same quality which you would expect, which is in fact love and comfort. Suddenly I was aware that her dead father was stood at the foot of her bed. My mother was staring at him too, and her face was lit up with joy. It was then that I saw her face appear to be glowing with a gold light. The light began to lead to the top of her head and go towards the ceiling. Looking back to my mother's face, I saw that she was no longer breathing. That's a very nice one, a transfiguration, the moment of death. So there are amazing things that happen. Now, let's move on to other things. This is clocks. Why clocks? Why should it's a lovely souvenir to find your clock stopped. But why? I think it's because you're always looking at your clock, your relationship with your clock. What about modern electronic clocks? Yeah, they stop too. Mechanical malfunction, televisions stop, alarms go off, time of death. Yes, non-local phenomenon. Just think of consciousness being wrenched or moving away from the body, and so there will be non-local effects. I love that one, it's Mr. Moggs. It came from the Daily Mail, and it's because we've got a lot of cat stories. You all know Oscar the Cat? Oscar the Cat was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Oscar the Cat wanders around the hospice and then curls up on the bed of the next person to die. And so he's been immortalized. I said that on Julian Richard's show, and we got 4 hospices sent me emails to say, yep, they had cats like that as well, in both places. So let's end, or come towards the end. Good death simply means the person has died as he or she wanted. This is very important, so make sure that you all let everybody know. Now, one of you, no, much more rare than that, sometime soon you may know somebody who's died, just got down from a heart attack. Did he write it out, or did she write something out so the relative knew what to do? He's only 40, dropped of a heart attack. So do it, for heaven's sake. Go home and write down what you want. The opportunity to talk about fears they may have about dying. This is in hospices, or if they had end-of-life experiences, to have them validated. And this is so important, and please do not forget it. It's in lights in your mouth. The chance to settle unfinished business and say farewell. You must do that. Do not hold grudges when you come to die. The ability to choose the time to die, either alone or with the family present, and that's important too. Let them know beforehand. And you'll find these non-local effects are very far-reaching. This is a father who's just about to die. My father and I never got on, and I'd left home at the age of 16 and never gone back, so this is his son's account. One day on my way to work, I had a sudden need instead to head north for home. When I arrived, Mum came rushing out in tears. My father was dying of cancer, and they had not been able to get in touch with me. I made my peace, and my dad, who said now he had seen me, he was ready to go. He died the next night. Very, very touching and impressive story, that non-local phenomenon. So, summary. Using the dead death criteria, this is what your map is like. Advance notice, welcome, preparation, time goodbye, and souvenirs. That's not scary. So, conclusion of the studies, Ellies are not uncommon. There's a spiritual language of the dying. Patients frightened to talk about in care seldom discuss Ellies between themselves. Carers do not have training in this area and find it difficult to respond to patients who want to talk about them, but this is less so in Holland. Dying is a spiritual process. The exit of consciousness is poorly understood and the mental states of the dying are neglected. So, in a nutshell, teach people, including children, for heaven's sake, their hamsters die, their cats die. They should understand what the dying process is. And teach them not to be afraid of dying. Learn what may happen when you die. Prepare for death. Don't just clean up your attic, clear up your relationships. That's enormously important. Discuss death. Don't sweep it under the carpet. This guy is going to die in 2 days. Fully prepared. He's had transcendent experiences. He knows exactly what's going to happen. He's come to terms with himself and his life. And this is what we should all be like. And he gave me, well, his family gave me permission. He showed this photograph to you. I think it's just wonderful. And you can see the transcendence within it. So don't be afraid. And we've written 3 travel guides for your last journey. The end-of-life experiences, training for carers, help relatives to dying. It's a very good one. It was written when Sue's father was dying, so she wrote it at his bedside. So it's terrific in a sense. And of course, none of you must go away without the art of dying. Absolutely essential. It's got lots of experiences in it, but remember this. The great inventor Edison, just hours before his death, emerged from a coma, opened his eyes, looked upwards, and said, "My God, the devil is there, raging." Of course he didn't. He said, "It's very beautiful over there." We've had no devil raging stories. I don't think they exist. Steve Jobs. According to his sister, as he died, Steve looked into the middle distance and said, in wonder, "Wow." So that's what you guys going to say. So there is hope for the dying. Think of it as a transition, but to where? Asked of Sarah, and it's a question of funerals and businesses. Yeah. And yes, they are a business, I absolutely agree. Should it be different? Well, we've started on a survey of funeral directors, and we've only done 4 so far, and they all have personal experiences with their family. But interestingly enough, not with their clients. But then, of course, one of the things we know now about end-of-life experiences and deathbed phenomena is that there's something to do with the relationship. I think Andrew has the answer to this one, and that is the narrative we tell ourselves about funerals and so on. If it's only just a piece of useless clod, as Shakespeare says, then you might just as well charge people a lot for taking it on. But if we have a different view, where in fact it was a human being with the capacity for transcendence, then you may feel that a business is inappropriate. Then we come into what sort of funeral you want. Have you all planned your funerals? Some of you have, well done. Then many of you haven't. How do you know you're not going to die tomorrow? Or tonight? Anyway, do it when you get home. Does it matter to die as I want? Does the dying person not have to learn the disintegration of the ego and align with the greater source? Funnily enough, I would answer that question now differently from the way that I did it before. If you go through preparation, then you will align yourself with the transcendent anyway. It's part of preparation for the dying process. But I still feel you need to know all you can about it. You need to learn about it so that you will understand what's going to happen to you. And I suggest that you read the Tibetan Book of the Dead as well. I can't really understand it because it's talking about concepts which I don't understand, like the red and white channels through which consciousness leaves. I don't know what that means. But as far as the dying are concerned, they're actually not worried about their red and white channels. But they are desperately worried about going into a transcendent realm. They love it. So, does it matter that you die as you want. Yes, it does, because you actually do have to learn to relax and go with the process. You do have to learn to give it up. And if any of you are interested, there's the Ars Moriendi Bene, which is in fact a book put together by the church. Actually, there are one or two of them, but there's some lovely German woodcuts from the time of the Great Plague, when there weren't enough curates to go around. And so they set up this question of what makes a good death. And one of them is coming to terms with the fact that you're dying, so that is important. My fear about death is to feel pain. You notice that I didn't talk about pain at all, and I didn't talk about pain because the modern hospice services are excellent. They're really excellent. And modern drugs are very important. Those we're on to drugs, I'll just say one very quick thing. It's better to die conscious if you can, but of course you don't want to die in pain. So take all your analgesics, say about pain, but ask them not to give you midazolam, because then you'll lose consciousness. Probably best to die conscious. And this person's theory is also to be buried alive. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd like that. Will you be buried alive? Strangely enough, we've got one or two people, not in our surveys, for heaven's sake. This is in the near-death literature, to be gone into morgues and so on. I think it's very rare, so I wouldn't put it high on your priority list. How would you explain the process to someone that is a non-believer of the afterlife? There is no belief structure in this, and that is the main point. This is what happens. So it's not a question of belief that there's an afterlife. In actual fact, it makes no difference, because we've got people who don't believe in an afterlife, and their experiences are the same. So say to them, you don't believe in an afterlife? Perfect. Look at what's going to happen to you. That's all you need to do. Get your map. Then you're prepared. Then you're ready. And when the final transition occurs, after you've said your dying goodbyes and delivered a large number of souvenirs for your family to have, well, then you can come back and tell us.
Sorry, another question. I meant not necessarily for the person who has passed away, I mean to the person that has had a loss.
It has.
Who had a loss. And I'm talking about the
Oh, yes.
person
Okay.
that died.
Well, then there are two ways of doing this. One is to just do what I said. I think the most important thing is to let them talk about it and see, so that they can, in fact, start their grieving process. I think that's very important. If they don't believe in an afterlife, I don't think it really matters, because you can tell them what happens during the death process, and that's what the pointers are. Then you can say, on the other hand, if you like to look at what other cultures and our culture says about it, you can do. But I think probably that if they're really upset by that, then the main thing you can do is to just sit there and listen to their sadness. That's very important. And I wouldn't concentrate on the afterlife, unless they specifically bring it up. Is it good or bad to let young children go to the funeral? You must judge this yourself in your own family. Depends totally on the child. You see, we had a grandchild that had 2 guinea pigs, and they ran in a run in the garden. And one day, a fox came in, turned the run over, bit both guinea pigs' heads off. And when he came downstairs, he was faced with 2 dead guinea pigs. Now that was a horrendous thing for him to see. And so he needs very careful counselling and talking to about these things. And some of them would be interested to know, particularly as the grandparents get old, they're going to die. And it should be something natural. You see, the trouble is that, as I said at the beginning, we swept death under the carpet. But judge it with the maturity of the child. And I expect most children probably go. But then you must look after them and explain to them what's happening. But I wouldn't put an absolute bar on it. I wouldn't force the child to go if it's incorrect for that child.
My own experience of that, because when my father died, I was 5. They thought I was too young to go and see him. And for me, somehow, even now, even though I understand, it's like he left, and I don't know where he went.
Yes, yes. I think that's such an important comment, because it means that we really must have death back in the frame in our culture, and not sweep it away all the time. And we should be really happy that birth and death are what it's about. Everybody's happy about birth. Perhaps we should be happy about the death too. If we see it as transition, that puts a different value on it. Just one last question for you all. How many of you have had related to you end-of-life experiences of the sort that I've done? Oh, interesting. It's usually about a third, and I think you're just under a third. So probably fewer here. Okay. So thank you all very much. Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.